Hi, class. We have two lectures left. Today we're going to be talking about health issues in older adulthood. And the last lecture we have, unfortunately, is death and dying. It's a weird way that this human development class plays out, not just mine, but human development courses, across colleges and universities. So today, again, we're going to be talking about health issues, just some common issues at least, in older adulthood. Before we get into specific health issues, I wanted to talk a little bit about life expectancy. The idea here is that people are living longer, and this opens them up to more opportunities to get different diagnoses and experience different health issues. So, life expectancy has changed quite a bit over generations. You can think about, a little bit over 100 years ago, people were only living to be about 50 years old. Now, many of you know lots of people who are 50 and older. The life expectancy on average is about 76 for men and 81 for women, and pretty much around the globe, and we'll look more into that in just a second, we see women living longer than men. And again, we'll talk more about that. Some of the reasons why life expectancy has become elongated include just improved nutrition. So our biological needs are met in that way. Obviously, improvements in medical treatment. Issues with sanitation have been improved, so that also just goes back to illnesses. And then safety concerns, starting even at young ages. We're not working in coal mines anymore, and as many of us as at least not in childhood. So that's also part of those factors that lead us to live longer lives. Even heart disease has dropped in the last 50 years. So even diseases that we know are affecting a large proportion of society are also decreasing. And that also could be because of improved nutrition and improved education about these different illnesses and diseases. Now, life expectancy, we can also talk about it from a different perspective. We can talk about it as the healthy life expectancy. So this isn't just how long are you living, but this is how many years you're living or expecting to live in full health without disease and injury. And, you can imagine that this is important because it's affecting one's quality of life. If you are living for the last 10 years of your life having dementia or other chronic illness or pain, then usually well-being is affected by that. Versus if one is experiencing their healthy life expectancy, then maybe their more optimal levels of well-being are able to be experienced. When we talk about living a long life and that looks quite different from person to person, right? The average we just talked about 76 in men, 81 in women. There are a lot of people who actually reach the age of 100, and maybe you know somebody who is 100 years old or older even. And when we look at statistics, and I just double checked this statistic to see if this is still true today, but about 1.7 people out of 10,000 live to be 100. So it's not a huge number, but it's still growing. And as time progresses, we'll see more and more people who are living over that 100-year-old threshold. I think that's quite an accomplishment. We're going to look at some data in just a second about from Solomon and colleagues who did a study in 2012 about where different countries fall when it comes to the longest life expectancy. And here they were measuring life expectancy as it's traditionally measured, just until death, and not healthy life expectancy. But I want you to think about, where does the US fall on this list? And we'll get to that in just one second. This data from Solomon and colleagues, again, was from 2012, so numbers might look a little bit different today, but usually life expectancy and those figures don't change, that rapidly in a short period of time. So I'm going to say that these numbers are probably going to be pretty close to where they are in 2020. Also, this is a nationally representative sample from each of these different countries. 187 countries or nations were examined in this study. This isn't representing every single country or nation, but it is representing most countries and nations. And essentially, they were looking at healthy life expectancy, and we're going to be talking about both highest and lowest, and it is divided by male and female. So earlier when I said that they were looking at overall life expectancy, this is actually showing healthy life expectancy. So you see numbers are a little bit lower. So these represent the top 10 countries with the highest healthy life expectancy from this data in 2012. And you see that Japan is in the lead, both for males and females. And again, those numbers are of 70.6 for males and 75.5 for females are lower than those overall life expectancy because this is representing healthy life expectancy. So you see the top countries in the world are Japan, Singapore, Switzerland, Spain, Australia, Italy, Andorra, Canada, Israel, and Sweden, representing the top 10 in males. And most of those countries are also found for healthy females too. Um, there are many different factors that influence why these countries. Most of these countries are going to be more affluent, and so with affluence comes improved nutrition and medical treatment and so on, like we've already talked about. Some of these countries are really devoted to well-being and trying to make sure that their citizens are taken care of. Some of these countries are known for healthy diets and low rates of obesity, and obesity is associated with many, many different health concerns. And so, for those reasons, these countries tend to be high and at the top of the list. We're going to show you where the US is in just one second. But before I do that, we're also going to be talking about the lowest life expectancy rates and which countries fall into that category. On this slide, we see the 10 lowest countries for male healthy life expectancy rates and the 10 lowest countries for female healthy life expectancy rates. You'll see some of the same countries in both lists. And so in general, many of these countries you may notice are from less wealthy or developing countries. And so going back to those ideas of nutrition and medical treatment and sanitation and safety, these are going to be factors that are influencing these life expectancy rates. I will also note that there are situational factors that play too, or context matters essentially. So for example, you see Haiti is in this list at the very bottom, so lowest healthy life expectancy rate. And one of the reasons why it's particularly low, Haiti normally is a developing country that struggles. But in the year that this data was taken, just to give you some context, this is when Hurricane Sandy affected the island, and so many people were affected by that. For some of these countries, also in 2012, they were, undergoing a civil war, and so you can imagine how that is affecting individuals broadly in terms of maybe even food supply, and not just like murders and death from fighting. So you see that a lot of these countries are going to be on this particular list or this low on the list for some of these situational factors. But you see that the age right there for Haiti is 27.8 for males and 37.1 for females. That's quite low. So going back to the United States, hopefully you are already thinking about where does the US fall on this list. So the list I provided on the slide previously showed that the top 10. And here you see that the US for males comes into 34th place. So the average healthy life expectancy for males is about 66 years old. And for females, it comes in 33rd place, and so a little bit older, as is expected. It's almost 70 years old. So that's 70 years old without experiencing significant health issues. So maybe that's interesting to you. Maybe it's surprising. I imagine for many of you, it's not all that surprising. Let's get into some more interesting findings. And I just hope that you enjoyed these Solomon findings. I just think that they're particularly interesting. No matter what we, do, or no matter what we want to do, we know that aging happens. This is just normal part of the lifespan. Just these progressive signs of physical deterioration. We're going to talk about the body broadly, and then we're going to talk about specific illnesses today. But this is just intrinsic to the aging process. Like we are aging. The onset varies quite substantially, but nevertheless, this is something that is universally experienced. We do have genetic markers that are pre-programmed into our DNA to basically tell us when aging is going to start, similar when we talked about puberty or similar to when we talked about menopause. There are genes that are these that are telling us when these things are going to start to happen. So that said, there are three principles about these normal aging processes, and I'm going to go into each of these three principles. First of all, the first one is that normal aging turns into disease, and essentially what this means is that somebody starts to have difficulties handling life. As some examples of these, we have more of these chronic diseases. These are more at the extreme, but that the outcome is just really some difficulty. We're going to talk more about osteoporosis at the end of this lecture, but this is bone density loss. We could also talk about plaque buildup in arteries, and what essentially is that turns into is heart disease. If you have normal wear and tear on the body, this is turning into arthritis. So this is just the normal aging process, but that's turning into something more. And then that something more is affecting just, one's daily life. Not to say that everybody is experiencing these to the same degree. And like I said, osteoporosis is going to be discussed at the end of the lecture, as is arthritis. But in general, the take-home message here is that even just going through normal aging can turn into significant difficulties just doing normal life activities. As you probably can imagine and know people in your own life who are struggling in these ways.